My brother's voice echoed in my head. That one word, backup. It used to cut deep, like a blade. But tables turned, didn't they? I now owned everything he once held dear, every key to his precious empire. It's ironic how tables turn. All my life, I've lived in his shadow, the spare part always overshadowed by my brother. Every opportunity, every triumph seemed just a few steps beyond my reach, more his by default than ever rightfully mine. His careless words were like daggers, cutting deeper each time, as if I was merely a stand-in until the real deal arrived. Then this morning, a call shattered the usual rhythm, his voice trembling as I relayed the news. I steeled myself for disbelief, yet the silence stretched dangerously between us. It was louder, more meaningful than any reprimand or denial. Finally, I had his undivided attention, not as an afterthought, but as the driving force. This wasn't serendipity. It was a meticulously orchestrated maneuver. As I set the phone down, a surge of exhilaration mixed with a sharp edge of guilt ran through me. The games had begun, and there was no turning back. I sat there, the glossy surface of the dining table reflecting a twisted reality in the flickering candlelight, like some theatrical stage where I played the perpetual understudy. My brother lounged at the head, confident, in control, his voice like silk weaving through the air. His latest triumph, a high-level promotion, was the topic of the night, his charisma pulling every gaze toward him like a ravenous black hole. "I always knew you'd make it big," Dad chimed, his tone an avalanche of pride that buried me further. My brother basked, grinning, the kind of grin that stretches impossibly wide, mocking the effort I put into my own life, constantly overlooked. "What about you?" he asked suddenly, turning to me with that casual indifference. "Still working at that backup job?" The room contracted, each tick of the grandfather clock behind us punctuating my inadequacy. "Yeah, I'm still there," I replied, forcing the words through a vocalist's strained smile, every syllable jagged against my throat. I could feel the warmth of their laughter slipping away, leaving me in the cold margins, an unwanted echo at the end of another grand applause. The conversation moved on, ricocheting off topics where I was nothing more than a shadow, a silent spectator to his well-curated life. My mother attempted to draw me back in. "Remember when you used to run around in those cowboy boots?" she asked, nostalgia tugging at her voice. But it was a ghost of a story tied to a younger, brighter me, a reflection of my former hope, now distant. "Yeah, those boots," my brother added, his chuckle soft and patronizing. "And then I got you that badge set for Christmas. Made you deputy to my sheriff." His words, honeyed with sarcasm, poured over the memory, souring it. Everyone else seemed to find it charming, their chuckles floating around before dissipating like smoke, leaving only the insidious scent of it lingering. I nodded, a brittle acknowledgement that felt more like resignation than agreement. Inside, everything simmered, thoughts clenching like winter-bared trees. Every joke at my expense, every slight, a nail driven deeper into the festering resentment that lived just beneath my skin. And yet, I sat there, silence disguised as calm. My own words echoed in my mind, clanging loudly against the confines of my disbelief. Why couldn't I just tell them everything I've accomplished matters, too? The desperation clawed at me, a relentless tide threatening to break my fragile composure. But I held on, forced to wait for a change, any change. The dinner carried on, but I was already gone, retreating into the fortress of my mind, bricked up with disappointments and bruised dignity. Each clink of cutlery, each round of laughter, underlined what I already knew. Here, at this table, I would always be second. I find myself curled in the corner of the dim room, the shadows pushing in like old memories. I let them wash over me, an unrelenting tide, each one crashing in like an echo from a time I wish I could forget. It's quiet here, except for the whisper of my own breath, but inside my head, it's chaos. A spotlight illuminating the moments when I was smaller, somehow less. I try to shake it off, but the image of my father looms large, his disappointed gaze etched into the back of my eyelids. His words, not spoken but carved into silence, hit harder than any blow. I remember standing there, biting my lip until the metallic tang of blood nearly drowned out his silent scorn. "Look at your brother," he had said once, not needing to say it again. Every family dinner felt like a competition where I was always the runner-up in a one-man race. My mind skips further back, the heat of the schoolyard on that unforgiving June day. Sam and his friends, their laughter like a chorus of hyenas. "You'll never be like him," one had jeered, pointing towards the basketball court where my brother effortlessly sunk another shot. I shrugged it off back then, shielding myself with indifference, but the words smoldered under my skin. "Breathe," I tell myself. But with each inhale, another memory bleeds through. College, that relentless parade of achievements I couldn't claim. Each congratulatory handshake felt like a reminder. A party in my honor for a scholarship I'd never gotten, but you know who did. He was the toast of the night, and I raised my glass, hoping the wine would dull the envy. Instead, each sip only sharpened it. Each jibe, each comparison, like a needle threading my reality, until it stitched a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. The words spill out hoarsely, not for anyone to hear, but for the protest simmering inside me. This isn't a pity party, I assure myself as I push up from the floor. This isn't where it ends for me. Underneath the exhaustion, a flicker of something, resolve. It clenches my fists tight, and my heartbeat quickens in a way that feels different, promising. The walls no longer seem to close in. Instead, they form a border around a battleground. My battleground. I glance towards the mirror, where I barely recognize the person staring back. And yet, within those eyes, something burns, a hunger for change. For once, I'm ready to rewrite this narrative, to scribble out lines that never belonged to me and start scrawling my own, chaotic and unrefined, but utterly mine. A deep breath fills my lungs, and it tastes of resolve. The darkness is still there, but it's quieter now, submitting to the will rising within me. This is it, the raw beginnings of something new. With every memory that stings, I only feel more driven. I'm ready to forge a reality that, this time, threads my narrative, not anyone else's. The pub was almost empty, save for a few regulars nursing their drinks under the dim glow of hanging lights. The air reeked of stale beer and cigarette smoke, a comforting disguise for this clandestine meeting. I slipped into a booth in the shadowy corner, my eyes adjusting to the gloom. I felt my heart beating against my ribs, each thump a reminder that tonight was about something bigger than I ever anticipated. He was already there, my brother's business partner, stoically nursing his whiskey. I'd never liked the man. He always seemed too calculating, too comfortable in the shadows. His eyes met mine with a peculiar glint, and as I sat down, I could feel the unspoken tension layering the air between us. "You're late," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. His voice was a rough whisper, like gravel grating against stone. "Traffic," I muttered, waving a hand in dismissal. It wasn't traffic, it was doubt. Doubt over sitting here, doubt over what I might be tempted to do next. He nodded, a slow, deliberate gesture that seemed to peel back my composure one layer at a time. "I assume you know why we're here." I held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I've an idea." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Your brother is no longer the man who built this company. He's brash, arrogant, and too blinded by his own ego to see he's driving it into the ground." I remained silent, letting him spill the venom, each word a bitter truth I couldn't deny. My brother had changed, but admitting it felt like betrayal incarnate. "We can turn it around," he continued, his voice slick with promise. "You and I, together." The gravity of what he was suggesting weighed heavily in the room, pressing me against my seat. I had imagined power, control, always just beyond my reach. Now, here it was, handed to me on a platter. "There's more at stake than just business," he said, eyes fixed on mine. "We have a chance to shift control quietly, permanently." My stomach twisted, a blend of anticipation and fear. "And what's your angle in this?" A smile crept onto his face, a predator's smile. "I plan to stay on as your second. I need someone with the vision your brother lost long ago." I leaned back, the booth's cracked leather cool against my skin. There, in the dim light of the backroom, my heart pounded not with fear, but with the realization that I held a key to something much larger. Something transformative. Slowly, deliberately, I nodded. "All right, but we do it my way." His eyes glimmered with approval. "Your way, then." As he emptied his glass, I could feel the moral threshold I was stepping over solidify beneath my feet. The path ahead was dark, fraught with uncertainty. But for the first time in forever, I felt ready to walk into the unknown, leaving behind the shadows of passivity. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed just above my shoulders, drowning out the muffled whispers of ambition that filled the room. I could feel my heart synchronizing to this new rhythm, a relentless, driving pulse as I studied the battlefield sprawling across polished mahogany. The chess game looked different now, each piece carrying weight, potential, consequence. I adjusted my tie, keenly aware of the gauntlet of eyes upon me, some curious, others hostile. They watched as I planned my next move, the taste of power both exhilarating and terrifying, like savoring the lip of a knife. With a steady hand, I sealed another deal, another calculated alignment that chipped away at the fortress of my own inadequacy. Each decision was a gamble, a calculated risk, and I found a strange thrill in it. The air was electric, crackling with the scent of, was it fear? No, anticipation. With every strategic play, I navigated a web of deceit and ambition, feeling for the first time that I'd stepped onto an equal playing field. With every deal struck, every alliance formed, I whispered to myself. The chains that held me as a backup began to clink, one link at a time, into obsolescence. I met Patricia's gaze across the conference table. Her eyes flickered with suspicion, an unspoken challenge that simmered beneath her cool exterior. Patricia had always seen this side of me, even when I couldn't. Her presence felt like the edge of a blade pressing lightly against my jugular. A dare to make the next move, to risk it all. Would she be the first to discover my ascent, my newfound thirst for more than the shadows? Or would she be an ally, someone to walk with, rather than against? The thought thrilled yet terrified me, possibilities expanding like blooming fireworks. I had to proceed carefully, folding my desires into the creases of my business acumen, hiding them just beneath the surface. From the corner of my eye, Jacob, the old loyalist, gave me a subtle nod, a silent recognition of my metamorphosis that fanned the flickering embers of my confidence into a roaring flame. My resolve solidified. I would not back down. This was my time. Each decision, each delicate dance around prying eyes and probing questions, pushed me further from the person I used to be. What started as tentative steps now felt like striding with clarity and conviction. The stakes were higher, the risks towering like a precarious stack of dominoes. One wrong move could unravel everything. But oh, the thrill of it, the sweet intoxication of standing on this precipice. It rushed through me, a heady cocktail of fear and triumph, as I dared to imagine a world where I wasn't just a shadow, but a force of my own making. This was my life, rescripted, and as my spine straightened and my voice firmed, I knew I would never let them change it back. I unlocked an old box from the attic the other day, uncovering a flood of memories I thought I'd forgotten. It's not the kind of clutter you'd expect, the kind lined with dust and neglect. It's the opposite, really. Pristine, as if time had tiptoed around it. Inside, I found a photograph of us by the lake, taken on what felt like the only sunny day one gloomy summer. Nolan and I, side by side, our faces stretched in unguarded laughter, the sun melting into the horizon behind us. I could almost feel the warmth creeping over my skin through the frozen memory. There, by the lake's edge, we were kids grasping at the edges of grandeur, planning adventures with a seriousness that defied our years. He had this knack for making the ordinary feel extraordinary, for transforming a lazy afternoon into a saga of pirates and buried treasures. Each laugh was genuine, untouched by the bitterness that later wove through our lives. I remember the way the wind rippled across the water that day, the scent of wildflowers tickling our noses as we lay in soft grass, heads thrown back to bask in the indulgence of simply being. One day, we'll sail across the seas, he declared, his voice a perfect mix of defiance and wonder. I laughed, not at the notion itself, but at the certainty it carried, the whole future unfurling in those small moments as if it was wrapped tightly in our fists. Our arguments, his cold stares, seemed so distant as I sat reminiscing. They faded, diminished by these rare flashes of undiluted happiness. Here's the strange thing, buried beneath the resentment, the anger, was this insistent thread of love that refused to sever, no matter how sharp the conduit of time or the edges of our discord. It bound me to those days at the lake, even as I sometimes wished it wouldn't. How I hated him for it, his ability to tie me to warmth. Hey, remember that time you dared me to jump in fully clothed? His chuckle echoes in my mind, a sound I could almost reach out and touch. Of course, I'd done it. He was right there with me, dragging me along the path of reckless abandon. We emerged from the water, laughter spilling out and slicing through the summer air, our clothes soaked and clinging to us like an old skin. Somewhere beneath our fights and his scorn were memories like these, echoes of a bond that I missed even as I plotted, an enigma of heartstrings woven with barbs of affection and animosity. My head tries to convince me they were just fleeting moments, but my heart anchors there more than I care to admit. As I close the box, softly, I'm left with a determination. Maybe it's time to carry these lighter memories forward, time to confront the tangled thread rather than continually weaving it with shadows. The thud of the door echoed through the dim room, bouncing off the walls like a gunshot. I turned, already knowing who stood there, his silhouette as familiar as the lines on my own hand. My brother, eyes blazing, fists clenched, a storm of righteousness twisted into human form. You think I didn't see what you were doing? His voice broke the stillness, each word like a lash. The room felt too small, too suffocating, filled with the weight of all our shared years, the things never said festering between us. I refused to flinch, meeting his glare with a steady resolve that I could feel simmering in my chest. It's not what you think, I replied, though there was defiance where there should have been apology. He laughed, a bitter sound that sliced through the thin veneer of our civility. All those times, hiding in the background, quietly waiting for your turn. Now you're doing this. He stepped closer, his presence almost intoxicating with its mix of familiarity and confrontational energy. Why now? He demanded. Because I'm done with waiting. I snapped, the confession erupting from me before I could stop it. No more shadow, no more silence. You're wrong, I said, meeting his gaze. I'm not your backup. Never was. The words hung in the air between us, the truth of them stark and undeniable. I watched as his expression shifted, anger battling with something else, something friendlier. Is that what you think this is? He challenged, his voice quieter now, but no less powerful. I nodded, feeling the tight coil of resentment unravel with each heavy breath. I've always been the second pick, the one you never quite noticed unless I was useful, I said, each word heavy with the weight of years unacknowledged. He shook his head, a small, desperate movement. You were never unseen, he said, his tone softening, a plea wrapped in frustration. Not to me. And yet, I could no longer buy into the pretense that had bound me for too long. Then why does it feel like I'm always standing in your shadow? I asked, my voice steady, though the tremor in my heart was palpable. The question lingered, unanswered, like a bird perched before flight. His silence was its own admission, a tacit acknowledgement of the roles we'd been locked into without choosing. For the first time, I saw him not as my brother, the protector, but as a mirror of my own struggles, a participant in the cycles we were desperate to break. In that moment, a fragile understanding bloomed between us, marked not by resolution, but by a mutual recognition of our flawed humanity. The tension began to dissipate, leaving behind a raw, unvarnished truth, a shift that neither of us could reverse. And in the quiet aftermath, I felt something in me uncurl, a new sense of liberation, the beginning of a balance long overdue. The room was as silent as a cathedral, and that quiet wrapped around me, sitting heavy like an unwelcome old friend. The victory I had been chasing wasn't a triumphant roar. It was a murmur, a barely audible whisper that lingered long after the dust had settled. I stood there, surrounded by the ghosts of my own choices, each corner of the room holding a piece of the past gently, like a curator handling a fragile artifact. Sunlight streamed through the smudged window, casting jagged stripes across the floor. They seemed alive, shifting as if responding to my breaths, drawing intricate patterns that danced in and out of existence as the clouds passed by. Freedom felt sharp, edged with a solitude I hadn't expected, and I couldn't help but wonder at the cost of claiming my own space in the world. Victory wasn't as loud as I'd imagined, more a hushed echo of freedom, and I wasn't sure who I had become in reaching it. My reflection caught in the warped surface of the mirror, the person staring back, almost a stranger. Shadows carved hollows beneath my eyes, and I looked deeper, searching for the person I might recognize. There was strength there, a quiet resilience that had woven itself into the fabric of who I was now. I moved, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet, a soundtrack to the solitude in which I found myself immersed. I walked to the window and pushed it open, the rush of cool air washing over me like a baptism. It smelled of rain, the world outside brimming with the promise of a storm not yet come. I closed my eyes, felt the wind threading through my hair, and imagined it carrying away the dust of memories that clung to my skin. I had won, but victory didn't accommodate company. It was an empty room with nothing but the memory of laughter and arguments, of decisions that had led me here. It was a space to fill anew, but for now, it was vacant, and the absence echoed louder than any triumph I'd imagined. My hand rested against the window frame, my fingers tracing patterns along the chipped paint, each flake a testament to history. I thought of the phone on the table, silent and still, my solitary link to a world from which I had distanced myself. I knew deep down that the path to who I wanted to become would require reaching out yet again, a reconciliation with the self I had left behind to become this one. But not yet. For now, I needed silence to map out this new terrain. I turned from the window, closing it softly, sealing in the heavy air of contemplation. This new understanding, this identity, was still being shaped. As much as it hurt, I knew this was where I needed to be, balancing on the edge of what was and what could be. The quiet stretched out, a canvas yet undefined, and I was poised at its cusp, ready to begin again. His text was out of the blue, simple, almost like a peace offering. I stared at it, wondering if it was time to turn a new page. The letters seemed to float above the screen, the weight of years carried in their simplicity. Coffee tomorrow, it read, punctuated only by his name. Jonah, my brother, a name that had become a ghost in my life, appearing in whispers and memories rather than present moments. I sighed deeply, sitting on the edge of my bed, my fingers tracing the curve of my phone as if it might convey the texture of his voice. Memories filtered through my mind like an old, scratched film reel. The laughter, the shared secrets, the moments when we were simply us before the fracture. Did I resent him? The question buzzed, insistent. Yes, I did, if I were honest. Yet, beneath that resentment, there was a longing I couldn't ignore. A part of me craved the connection with the only sibling I had, the person who held pieces of my history that no one else could understand. A hesitant tap of my thumb sent my response into the ether. Sure, I typed, the word hovering in my mind as a fragile attempt at mending. It felt like placing a single stone to construct a bridge over a chasm. Could something so small hold any real weight against the years of silence and distance? The cafe was quiet, a sparse scattering of tables, and the inviting aroma of brewed beans creating a peaceful backdrop. I perched on a wooden chair, the cold surface grounding me as I waited. Every sound, the low hum of conversation, the hiss of steam from behind the counter, seemed heightened, each detail a marker of the moment's gravity. When Jonah walked in, I noticed how time had etched itself onto his face, lines cast by unshared stories and separate lives. He paused when he saw me, and for a moment, we were suspended in the tension of old wounds and new possibilities. Then, a fleeting smile, hesitant yet genuine, curled his lips. Hey, he said, his voice a gentle intrusion upon the silence that had grown between us. Hey, I echoed, the words simpler yet heavier than I'd imagined. We ordered, and as the cups warmed our hands, we settled into a rhythm of awkward questions and stilted answers. Yet, beneath the awkwardness, there was something calming, like the first sunlight breaking through after a storm. I sipped my coffee, its warmth spreading through me, mirroring the tentative comfort of his presence. I realized, as words began to cautiously bridge the gap between us, that this was the start. Maybe not the sweeping reconciliation stories are made of, but the softening touch of an olive branch extended and reciprocated. His eyes, searching mine for something familiar, reflected the hope of a part-way thaw, an unspoken agreement that perhaps, this time, we both could meet in the middle. The cafe's warm light fell in soft pools around us, casting long shadows on the polished oak table. The hum of subdued chatter and the hiss of the espresso machine filled the room, but my world had narrowed to the face opposite. My brother sat there, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug as if anchoring himself. I watched him sip his coffee, a familiar sight, yet with an unfamiliar gentleness in his gaze. It felt like a new beginning, fragile yet hopeful. We were both hesitant, the silence stretching between us, but it was a silence filled with potential, not discomfort. The kind that invites you to speak truths you've kept silent for too long. Finally, he broke it. "I missed this, you know," he said, his voice carrying a weight that spoke of unsaid apologies. He set his mug down carefully, the clink of ceramic soft, almost tentative. "I've missed it too," I admitted, feeling a knot in my chest untangle just a little. It was true. Despite everything, there was a part of me that longed for the easy camaraderie we used to share. His eyes, mirrors of my own, held a vulnerability I hadn't seen for years. I was wrong about so many things. He was drawing lines in the air with his words, sketching out where the past had spiraled and where it could have been saved. I nodded, feeling the apology weave itself into the spaces between us. Me too. The words were simple, but the history they uncovered was anything but. Still, under the old scars, there was room for something new. Complex, maybe, but new. His lips curved into a small, tentative smile. "We're not kids anymore, and I'm tired of holding on to grudges that feel so heavy." Relief washed over me, bringing an echoing emotion I hadn't anticipated: possibility. Yeah, there's too much life ahead to dwell on what we couldn't change. The past had a habit of casting long shadows, but here we were, in the present, daring to peer beyond them, skate across the surface of deeper waters. Waves of shared memories and wounds washed between us, but they couldn't tear apart the foundation we were relaying, one word at a time. We spoke for what felt like hours, moving across terrain both tricky and familiar, yet there was a clarity emerging from the complexity. His laughter, when it came, sounded like it used to, genuine, unguarded. My reflection found it mirrored in my own. The world around us ebbed away until the cafe's clock reminded us how long we'd stayed. We rose slowly, reluctant to let the moment slip away but buoyed by the sense that we were building towards more. This meeting, an unexpected gift, was the fragile thread that could string along the beads of a new connection. As we parted, the day's warmth trailed us, whispering promises of a renewed, but different, tomorrow.